Welcome to Coastal Front. Join us each week as we sit down with the movers and shakers of Vancouver to discuss stories of business, politics, accomplishment, and failure. Our aim is to keep you dialed into what matters most in our city. Now, here's your host, Andrew Johns.
Great. So happy to have you, Breen Ouellette. You are the NDP candidate for this upcoming federal election with Vancouver Centre. Thanks for being here on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you here. So we've got about 40 minutes to chat about your campaign. You've got a sort of a big hill to climb here. You're competing against Hedy Fry, who is the incumbent. She's been the incumbent since 1993 in Vancouver Centre. She's got a big following here in the city. And so, I want to give you the opportunity to talk about, why there should be a shift in that seat after so many years. So that's what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I'm grateful for the opportunity.
Yeah. Now to start, let's talk a little about yourself. You're originally from...
I'm originally from Saskatchewan. I grew up in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. I'm 42 years old. I'm a Métis person.
Yeah. And
I've had two careers before seeking to become a politician. When I got out of university, I was in IT, and I worked a couple of small businesses that I co-owned, and then I went to work for SaskTel, and I was with the CEP union as an elected steward and OH&S rep, occupational health and safety for your listeners that don't know those lingo.
Yeah.
And then I went on to become the director of IT for the Métis Nation Saskatchewan. And for a number of reasons, in 2010, I decided to make the shift to law. And I went back to law school and got my degree, and I was called to the bar in British Columbia. And then that culminated in my last job as a lawyer, which was with the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls.
Wow.
And Two-Spirit People, which was unfortunately left out of the name, but it shouldn't have been.
Okay.
But you'll have to ask our Liberal candidate in the riding why they failed to add the Two-Spirit People to the name.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Okay. It's interesting, Two-Spirit. If you had said that word to me about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I wouldn't have any idea what you were talking about. But I saw a really good short YouTube clip. I think the CBC had put it together that kind of explained what it was. But for those listeners that don't know, maybe you can do a quick explanation of what Two-Spirit is.
Well, it's a little difficult because it's not. It's kind of this pan-Indigenous term, and so different Indigenous nations will have their own specific language around it and their own specific meanings. But it essentially refers to individuals who fall outside of the gender binary. So they're on the spectrum somewhere else, or they identify outside of the binary majority.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Now you were in, as you mentioned, and I know you had also mentioned in our call earlier in the week before you came in that you can't speak to why you left that inquiry. But you were in the beginning, because that inquiry kind of had two phases to it, did it not? There's sort of two directors or something like that.
Well, it had three. It had three phases. It had the family member and survivor of violence hearings, and then it had the institutional hearings. And I was gone by that point. So that's what I saw of it. But as far as I started, I was approached in 2016 by one of the commissioners to work for the inquiry, and she's a dear friend and mentor, Marilyn Poitras. She ultimately resigned as a commissioner in 2017.
Right, that's the lady I was thinking about. I remember. Yeah. Yes. Okay.
And she came to me and she asked me, and I initially said no.
Okay.
I had experienced violence against Indigenous women and girls in my own life growing up in Saskatchewan, in my extended family, and also in the news. I mean, one of my memories still to this day is of a young teenage girl, very young teenage girl, being sexually assaulted by 3 men in Saskatchewan, and they essentially suffered no consequences for it.
Wow.
other than the public backlash. But as far as justice, it was not served in that instance. So I knew this was going to be difficult. This was going to be emotional. And I said no. And Marilyn's a wonderful soul. She said, that's fine. And I'll be in town a lot because we've got this new office in Vancouver. So I'll see you the next time I'm in. And then I couldn't sleep for 2 days because I kept thinking about my nieces.
Right.
And if something happened to one of my nieces, I'd blame myself.
For not being involved and being part of the solution as opposed to
not doing something when I had the chance.
Wow.
So I called her up and I said, Marilyn, I can't sleep. I'll send you my CV. And then I had to wait until April to be hired because I needed secret security clearance. And CSIS takes a long time to conduct that secret security clearance.
Yeah.
And then after I received the secret security clearance, it was still going to take the Privy Council office another 2 months to hire me. So I started working pro bono for the commission. I left my practice and did the work that I could, having the secret security clearance until they were able to actually get me officially onboarded.
Wow. And so how long were you involved before you decided to resign from that role?
The math. Well, I was officially involved from April of 2017, but I was doing work with them since February, and then I left in late June of 2018.
Okay, so just over a year.
Yeah.
So spent a lot of time in that.
Yeah,
okay.
It feels like a lot longer.
Yeah.
The hearings were very intense.
Yeah.
Typically, I would work no less than 16 hours a day at a hearing, but quite often I'd pull 24 or 48-hour shifts to do the work. And the reason for that is that normally as a lawyer, except in some criminal practices, but in a lot of cases, you've got months to years to work with your clients.
Sure.
With the witnesses of the national inquiry, we generally had no more than 6 weeks. And oftentimes people would be showing up the week of the hearing wanting to give their testimony, and we would have an opening because somebody was sick or somebody couldn't make it, and we'd do everything we could to get them in. And so there were times when I would pull those all-nighters just to make sure we got them in. And then
amazing.
You're listening to that,
That must have been emotionally really, really tough.
It's soul-crushing in some ways, and then it's also, it's inspirational to see how people have managed to pull themselves up out of it and move forward on it, and how they keep trying to achieve justice for their families, for themselves, for their community, for Canada. Many of them are doing it for all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. I mean, I think those are stories that need to be told for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Got to learn from our mistakes and also highlight those people who can have made it to give inspiration for others who are struggling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's go back. That's great. Thank you for that, Breen. Let's go back to you are now the candidate for Vancouver Centre NDP. How did you get here in the first place?
Well, I left the national inquiry and I had seen a lot. And one of the things that I noticed, I look for patterns. This is something that I do as a lawyer. And with government institutions, they build up these infrastructures around a group of people that they're intending to help. But they don't always actually help the people at the center. Oftentimes, because of systemic dysfunction and a failure of government or bureaucracy to self-evaluate, they just end up building up that infrastructure bigger and bigger, and we dump more and more money into it with worse and worse results. I mean, when you look at foster care apprehensions in this country, 50% of the children in foster care are Indigenous. And the reason that's happening is that, in large part, the provinces administer those programs, but they get the money from the feds because the feds are responsible for Indigenous children. So you've got a financial motivation to take Indigenous children into foster care because it's going to result in more money flowing from the federal government into provincial coffers. It's the absolute
crazy
worst reason.
That doesn't make any sense. Yeah. Okay.
It doesn't. It doesn't. Yeah. And we need to call attention to it in this country.
Yeah. So how did you actually get your name on the. Was there an internal vote? Like, were there people that stepped up to want to represent the NDP in Vancouver Centre before?
Yeah. So
I don't know how that worked.
I had all these thoughts rolling around in my head, and I've lived in the riding for a couple of years, worked and lived in the riding, and I knew I needed to do something more. I couldn't just go knocking on doors this time around. I had to do something. So I looked at who the candidates were, and there was nobody yet for the NDP.
Yeah.
So I contacted the riding president, and I said, I want to throw my name in the hat. And he said, great, we'd love to have you. So I put my name in the hat. I was one of the first.
Yeah.
There was somebody that came a couple months before me, but she had to drop out. And then a couple others came about a month after I did. And so I was running against Morgane Auger and David C. Jones.
Okay. And how does it work? So there's a vote internally within the riding members of the NDP. Is that how it works?
Yes, that's right.
So it's like you already had your first run at getting elected to get this role. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah. The card-carrying members of the NDP hold. We elect our candidate. It's not by appointment.
Right.
Some other parties, it's by appointment.
Yeah.
And some other parties are pretty. I think it's safe to say that they eat their young, is the way that you could put it. I'm familiar with. There's a gentleman, I think his name is Brad Trost in Saskatoon. I've got family out in Saskatoon, and he's a long-time standing Conservative MP.
Yeah.
And he ran against Mr. Scheer in the leadership race.
Yeah.
And Mr. Scheer returned the favor by running somebody against him in a nomination campaign, and they ousted their sitting MP. They're running somebody who hasn't been an MP, and their Conservative is out on the street. So we don't do that. We don't do that in the NDP. Yeah. It seems a little bit vindictive.
Yeah. Okay, so you got that. When did you find out that you won that candidacy nomination?
Oh, that was the date was July 28th.
Okay. So quite recently.
Yeah. So yeah.
Okay. Now the election is on October 21st.
Yes.
Right? Good. I'm glad we're all on the same page.
Assuming something doesn't. Yeah.
I guess they could call the election early.
There was a. Well, I don't think they will. There was a question about it because the date of October 21st falls on a Jewish holiday, and so a lot of Jewish voters are being excluded from voting on that day, and the previous two. Or 3 or whatever it is, the previous advanced voting polls are on the Sabbath, so they're excluded from voting on that day too. So the only way they can vote is to go down to Elections Canada and do a write-in ballot, which with my last name and all the vowels in my last name, that's very onerous. It's very rare that people spell my last name correctly, and they aren't even allowed to bring in a piece of paper to reference. They have to go in and remember how to write somebody's name from memory. To vote in this election, and Mr. Trudeau decided not to change the date.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's interesting. Well, we could go on. We could probably do a podcast for 2 hours about all the problems with Mr. Trudeau, who, as I told you before you came in, I actually voted for him in 2015. I was really inspired. I'd never voted for a Liberal Party before. Historically, I've either voted Green Party or Conservative. I voted NDP provincially. So I've kind of been all over them. I'm that swing vote that people like you got to get in front of.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely not voting Liberal this time around. That's for sure. I'm very, very disappointed with Justin Trudeau. Let's talk about what it is that you bring to Vancouver Centre that is something that you think has been missed through Hedy Fry since she's been in an MP since 1993, or maybe something she used to bring to the constituents of Vancouver Centre but doesn't anymore.
Yeah. I think this is what I believe is happening because people are telling me on the street. I'm hearing these stories all the time. They have no access to their MP. When they need their MP's help, they can't talk to her. They can't make meetings with her. There was an instance where I'm going to be vague on the details because I don't want to be identifying people without their permission. But someone was telling me that she had married outside of the country, And she came back to Canada, and she was pregnant with twins, and she wanted to sponsor her husband to come to Canada so they could be living together. And she needed a recommendation letter from Hedy, and she went to the office, and she was kept waiting and ended up waiting a long time and not getting in to see Hedy, and then came back again, waiting a long time. She got fed up. She went up to the staff person, and she said, "Look, I just need to talk to Hedy about this letter, this recommendation letter." And the staffer said, "You asking to meet with Hedy is like a Starbucks barista asking to meet with the Prime Minister of Canada." That
Really?
was the response. And she ended up leaving Hedy's office.
That's so vivid. No one's making that stuff up, folks, just to be clear.
Yeah.
Like,
and so she left, and she went to another riding.
yeah.
And she asked the MP for a letter, and the MP said, "Oh, your address isn't in my riding. Why are you asking me?" And she said, "I'm in Hedy Fry's riding." And the MP said, "I understand." And he wrote the letter.
Oh, wow.
So there's broad understanding of the problem that
Yeah.
exists in this riding. We need somebody who will actually meet with people, listen to people, talk to people, and advocate for people.
Yeah.
And as a lawyer, I'm used to doing that. I mean, that's
sure.
that's the job, and I would love to bring that to Vancouver Centre.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, let's maybe for a moment, Ross, let's pull up. Thanks for that, Breen, by the way. Let's take a look here. This is, and maybe you can scroll in a little bit, just zoom in a little bit, Ross, just so we can show that, interesting enough, Kim Campbell was the representative for Vancouver Centre before Hedy Fry.
Yes.
She was, if my memory serves me correct, she was Canada's first and only female prime minister, but actually we've never had an elected female prime minister yet, and she got bumped by Hedy Fry. Hedy's now been the MP since 1993, and if we scroll down a little further beyond if you go to 2015 Canadian election, scroll down a little bit further, Ross, we can see that Hedy in the last election got 56% of the vote.
Yes.
So, that's why I said earlier, you got a big mountain to climb. Now, that being said, it seems like the best thing going for you is Justin Trudeau and the Liberal Party and all the screw ups that they're making.
Yeah.
This SNC-Lavalin, as we saw in that article by I think it was the CBC. This is News 1130. Longest serving woman in Parliament admits that SNC-Lavalin controversy could hurt Liberals seeking re-election. And Hedy's now, I think she's about 80 years old, or she's about, I don't want to get that wrong, but you can click on the link and find it there. So she won 56% of the vote. Now, granted, I think there was a lot of protest votes against Stephen Harper in the last election. So again, let's go back to what are you going to bring to the table that's different than Hedy?
Yeah. Well, I think
other
that
than being available, which is, I think you just showing up here to this podcast is a good example.
Yeah. I think that the 56% on that, you can probably attribute a lot of that to Trudeau mania.
Yeah.
In 2015, in previous years, not every year, but in most years, the NDP have come close. We've come within striking distance.
Yeah. We can see it here actually. If we just scroll down a little further, you're right. Actually, if you take a look, there's 2011 election. NDP were 26% of the vote. Liberals were 31%. That's really, really close.
And the interesting thing about that was that was Karen Shillington, and she was, she didn't have a lot of resources. She didn't. She fought hard, but the spending was really low on her campaign. So, if she had the kind of spending that Constance had in 2015, if she had those kind of dollars, I think we would have had an orange riding in 2011.
Yeah.
And I think, people can be in something for a long time and then they become that establishment candidate and they become, comfortable.
Sure.
They become comfortable having the adoration of their constituents, and they become comfortable with calling the shots. And I'm just seeing a lot of people feeling that this election. Yeah. Now, that's not what I bring, but it's what I'm bringing is different. I'm not bringing that attitude. I'm not seeing myself as above everybody else. And
Yeah.
in a seat of privilege and power, I'm seeing myself as somebody that can fight for everybody in this riding.
Yeah.
That's what I've been doing as a lawyer, and I want to keep doing that as an MP. And I'm not afraid to speak my mind, even when other people would, they'd quiet down.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Ross, go back to the Wikipedia page and click on Hedy for a second. I want to make sure I got the age correct on this one. So there she is. Should show her. You scroll down. Keep going. There you go. She's 70. Sorry, Hedy, if you're listening, you're not 80 yet. You look way younger than 80. 78 years old.
She's 2 days older than my father. I didn't realize that. Oh, that's interesting.
There you go. One of my frustrations with these huge parties, I'm not necessarily going to put NDP in that party, partly because you guys have never had a position of real power in federally yet, but between the Conservatives and the Liberal Party is this toe the party line. I mean, that's one of the many reasons why I decided for this first time in my life to vote Liberal in the last election was because I saw in Stephen Harper someone who really expected everybody to kind of toe the party line. And I like individual thinkers. I like guys like you who come in here and you got a different kind of, different sort of, experiences in life and upbringing and views, but you're obviously a very intelligent guy. And I think so far what you've told me sounds really, pragmatic to be able to speak your mind. And you mentioned just a minute ago how you like to be able to speak up even when other people will quiet down. And I guess maybe can you comment for a moment on what is your view on that sort of toe the party line versus being able to have individual choice and freedom as an MP?
Absolutely. And it was a concern for me when I was looking into whether or not I would run. And before I made the decision, I read through the party policies.
Okay.
And one of the policies of the NDP is that we have a dissent policy.
What does that mean?
It means that if I don't agree with the party and I want to speak about that, I can, so long as I'm expressly clear that I am now speaking from my perspective and not the policy position of the party.
Okay. So you just have to put that as a disclaimer at the beginning and the end of a phrase. You're like, okay.
You got to let people know.
Yeah. Here's my opinion, and it's mine only. It doesn't stick with the party. Okay, I think that's reasonable.
And also, I have such, here's an example.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm in agreement with the NDP on accepting the finding of genocide in the final report of the National Inquiry.
Okay.
I diverge from the party on how we should respond.
Okay.
The party's position is that we need a national action plan to address the recommendations in the final report. As a lawyer, I'm very cognizant of a principle of natural justice. It's one of the foundational principles of law, which is that the accused should not be their own judge. And we've got a government that, under Justin Trudeau, has admitted to the finding of genocide. I mean, he tried to walk it back afterward, but he admitted to it. We've got two inquiries that have used the word genocide. The TRC called it cultural genocide, but the intent was the same.
And sorry, the TRC is
the Truth and Reconciliation Commission under Murray Sinclair. Yeah. Thanks for calling me on that.
Yeah.
It gets easy to fall back on acronyms.
Oh yeah, totally.
So we've got all this suggestion that Canada, the state, not, people kind of get caught up, oh, does that mean Justin Trudeau is going to jail? Well, no, we're talking about a state crime. So the state of Canada is alleged by its own internal processes to have committed an international crime. The obvious thing, given the principles of fundamental justice, is that an independent outside arbiter needs to be brought in. And we have one. It's called the International Criminal Court of Justice, the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court. We got two of these independent entities.
They're under the United Nations or something?
Yes.
Okay. Gotcha.
And so let's invite them in. Let them evaluate the situation, identify the problems, and make binding findings against the government of Canada. You need to stop doing this, and you need to fix it by doing this. It's that simple.
Great.
If we let Canada keep doing it, it's just going to keep
Goes
ignoring
back
the
to
issue.
your analogy of letting the accused decide their own judgment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you let
Or
someone accused
punishment.
if you let someone accused of murder sit as the judge on their own case, I
Yeah.
think you know what the outcome is going to be.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And it's time.
Yeah.
It's really time to, some people are exhausted by this and they're like, why don't we just move on? Well, when a woman was sterilized in Saskatchewan in December of 2018 because she was an Indigenous woman at a hospital by a surgeon without
year
her
did you
consent.
say?
2018, December 2018, there is an accusation that a surgeon in Saskatchewan sterilized a woman without her consent because she was Indigenous. This is happening in our country today,
Holy shit.
and we need
You gotta
to
be
address
kidding
it. I'm not kidding you.
Fuck.
So, this is the reality we're
Yeah.
dealing with, and
I mean,
you know
Breen,
what?
this is really this is great, man. Thank you for this. This is I think this is the kind of stuff that people need to hear about.
Yeah.
But let's go back to
Okay.
Vancouver Centre.
Okay.
No, because I want to go back to the Wikipedia page, and on the Wikipedia page, there's actually if you go straight to the top, you'll see here. Sorry, down a little bit, the demographics.
Mm.
Now, Aboriginal is only 3% of your constituents.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know. Maybe you're going to get a lot of people like myself who's not Aboriginal, but will hear you speak and go, "Here's a guy I'd vote for," because you're obviously very passionate about this report and fixing things. But we also see that, they say European. Let's just call it white people. 2/3 of the constituents are European, and then another 11% are Chinese.
Yeah.
When you're talking with the people you've been speaking with, aside from, I think you're going to be able to sell anybody, no problem, that you're the right guy to have in Ottawa to help address any of these issues around the again, the long name for this report was can you do it for me again? I'm so sorry.
It's the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls.
Yes.
And Two-Spirit People.
And Two-Spirit People.
Yeah.
So it's no doubt in my mind you're the right kind of person to have in Ottawa to address that. And you've also pointed out the fact that what you're hearing from a lot of your constituents is that Hedy's not she's just making herself available to the average barista.
Yeah.
What else you got? Like what are some of these, say, for example, what are some of the policies that you identify with the NDP that they're really, between the party as a whole and Jagmeet Singh are promoting, that you really get behind and you're like, you know what? I know my constituents believe in this. I believe in this. This is why they should vote for Breen Ouellette.
Yeah. Well, it's going to come as no surprise to anyone that lives here that housing is on that list.
Yeah.
And housing touches on it touches on the average person. It touches on seniors. It touches on people with disabilities. It touches on people of color. It touches on most, people don't even think about this, but it touches on young people with skills that we need to keep here so that we've got a skilled workforce.
Yes. Do you know who else it touches on? Very wealthy entrepreneurs.
Well,
successful entrepreneurs. And do you know why? Because we're the kind of people, I'm talking about myself, I'm not saying wealthy, but I'm just saying successful entrepreneurs.
Fair.
I've got 2 businesses and 24 employees.
Yeah.
And it's hard for me to keep them.
Yes.
It's hard for me to, they are struggling to get by to be able to save for themselves. And I want my employees, because I'm so close to them, to be able to eventually own a home. Yeah. So it's something that I think a lot of people don't realize, that there's even a lot of people out there that are the kind of, the kind of people who get pegged as like, well, you're obviously not experiencing any problems from housing. You've got lots of money, but no, it's not true actually, because I'm trying to run a business and I can't keep people here.
Yes.
They're leaving Vancouver to go to other communities, or, I can't afford to pay them what they're looking to get paid, and they can't afford to stay in the job at the rates I'm paying them because they need to get paid more. So
yeah. Absolutely. And I'm hearing that. I'm hearing that all the time on the street. And I'm also, I'm hearing from people who are homeless. Not, people have this conception in their mind about what homelessness is and who is homelessness, or who are homeless people. Well, I almost had to live out of my car in 2016. I'm a lawyer. My wife is a chartered accountant. and we had a house fire in 2016. And our social safety net is in ruins. It's threadbare, and people are falling through it left, right, and center. You just need one mishap at the wrong time in your life, and you'll find yourself living out of your car. And I went down to Oppenheimer Park before they dropped the eviction notice on them because I knew it was coming. I could see it. And I talked to a gentleman there who was a chartered accountant for 20 years. And he had some health issues and then a divorce, and he lost his home, and he's been living on the street ever since. 3 years he's been living on the street. He's got employable skills, but now he's trapped in a cycle of poverty and homelessness, and he can't get out of it.
Okay.
So we need to ensure that people have a way to prevent that from happening. And how we do it is we go back to
how do we do it?
How do we do it? We go back to what worked. When this all started happening around the time that Hedy came into her position, homelessness was way down, almost non-existent in the 80s. And then the federal housing ministry got rolled into social development or economic development. And that got rolled into social development. And then families got rolled into that. And it's like this long forgotten thing. We don't have a federal housing strategy anymore. We just don't. And the focus
isn't housing a provincial jurisdiction?
It is, but
a municipal jurisdiction.
But billions get transferred by the feds to the provinces,
right?
To help with that. The CMHC was brought in to ensure that we wouldn't have a homeless problem in this country. But over decades of successive establishment, liberal and conservative governments, the CMHC has been weakened terribly. And there's been a focus on one thing. Home ownership has been the focus of the federal government for decades.
Yeah.
And that translates to luxury condos in Vancouver. It's a one-size-fits-all plan that we know doesn't work in Vancouver because we went from almost no homelessness to around 600, and I might be a little off on the numbers, but around 600 homeless on the homeless census in 97. Then just 5-6 years later, we were up to 1,500. Last year, the shelter census, so these are just homeless people who are actually living in a shelter, was over 2,200. That's not counting the people who live in a tent under a bridge, on a sidewalk, in their car, or are couch surfing between friends and family. We've got a homelessness crisis happening in our city because our government is focused on ensuring that people who will never have trouble buying a home can buy a luxury condo.
Right.
We need to return to a social housing and co-op housing focus.
Okay.
We need market rent focus. Those are the areas that we need to look at, and that's what the NDP plan is all about. Going back to what worked, taking us back to a point in time where homelessness was virtually non-existent.
Okay. Well, let's dive into this a little bit more. So what is, for example, Breen, and do you need...
I'm going to have a sip, yeah.
Yeah, go for it. You mentioned those three strategies. So you mentioned co-op housing, market rent, and what was the third one you said?
Social housing.
Social housing, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about what those... So for the layman out there that maybe doesn't know, because these terms get tossed around a lot, and people don't really know what they mean. Yeah. Let's talk about what each of those are and how would the NDP roll something like that out. So let's start with what is social housing? Social
housing is housing for people who are unable to afford the market rent, and so they receive subsidy for living. They're often people with disabilities or seniors. Yeah. And sometimes they're people.
So this won't necessarily be homeless people.
Sometimes it's people that are being transitioned back into housing from being homeless.
Okay.
And a lot of times the image in people's heads right now is the modular housing that's out there.
Yeah.
And that frightens homeowners and property owners because they see it as something that's going to affect their property values.
Yeah.
To those people, I would ask them, if they live in Vancouver Centre, to go check out Mole Hill Housing Society.
Mole Hill Housing Society.
Yeah, most people don't even know that Mole Hill exists because it just looks like any other city block in the West End. And it's a beautiful place.
Where is it?
I can see that your producer's bringing up the map.
Yeah.
So it's
Pendrell Street.
Yeah.
Mole Hill. It's Community Housing Society.
Yeah, it's by Nelson. It's by Nelson Park.
Oh, okay, close to.
Yeah.
Oh, I know. This got that nice There's where the farmers market in the summertime is just on the other side. Yeah.
Yeah.
That place is, so that's social
fantastic.
housing.
That is social housing, and it's a fantastic community.
There's always kids around.
Yeah.
They've got, you basically can't drive a car down there. It's like, you just see family. It seems very vibrant. I know exactly what you're talking about. Because we used to live, my wife and I, when we first had our kids, we lived just a couple blocks down the street, and we would go up to the farmers market, and I'd always see these vibrant family environments.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
so how does housing around there work then?
Well, so what it was when that community was planned, they put some thought into making a community, and not just a place to box in people.
Okay.
So this is another thing that
was this a City of Vancouver initiative, or
it was multiple parties were involved. It was back in the 80s. And I know there are people out there that are better with the history than I am. I'm sure that Quentin Wright, the executive director of Mole Hill, would be happy to talk to people about it if you ever have him on the show. He's a great guy.
Okay. Yeah.
So the thing is, we need people in our government who are thinking outside the box like that. And it isn't even necessarily outside the box, because it's right there and we know it works. Yeah. We just have to implement it.
Just do more of them.
Yeah. And then that leads into co-op housing.
Yes.
So co-op housing is when people come together and buy a property as a community, and they each have a unit that they have bought a share in.
Yes.
And it allows people to live generally at or below the market rate.
Yeah.
And a great example of that is the False Creek Co-op, which is within the riding. And if you go and check out False Creek
that's the
Co-op,
one underneath the Granville Street Bridge, right?
It's
is that right?
it's over in that area. It's actually really big.
Yeah,
so
really big.
It's got a school attached and all. Yeah.
I know it because my cousin and his wife and their 4 little kids lived in there for a couple of years, and it was phenomenal.
It's another place where the people went in with an idea of, we are going to not just build a building, we're going to build a community.
Yeah. Oh, it was totally a community.
Yeah.
Like when they had they have a little preschool there as well, and it's actually volunteer run. Like it's mostly the parents who will pitch in, and things like getting, snacks made for the kids and whatnot. It was just an amazing system.
Well, it
was like a little like anthill, just like everybody's got their job, and it was so cool.
And what's really interesting is that co-op, of their own volition, as a group of voting members, have decided that some of their units will be subsidized by them for the less fortunate. So they've adopted a social housing model as a group of private citizens.
Wow.
Because they are that, committed to ensuring that people have options.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing, and it's unfortunate that the lease on the land is coming up soon. I think they've got 17 years left, and
that land, I believe, is also owned by, ironically, CMHC.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure.
Well, it's either the city or the CMHC, but yeah.
So hopefully they'll be reasonable with the renewal.
Well, what we need is to support that community, and we need to build on that kind of model. Yeah. Because it works well, and it integrates fantastically into the broader community. People love it. Yeah. So
so that's co-op housing. We talked about social. And what was the third one? It was,
and then market rent is.
What does that mean?
They're just buildings built strictly for rental purposes, and
free market kind of.
And it's like,
when you say market rent, you mean like a rental property only. Like they're not condos. You can't buy them.
Yes, exactly.
But they the builders can rent them at whatever the current market is. Yeah. Which we definitely, that's a supply issue for sure.
We need a lot more supply of that as well.
Yeah.
And we need to have a federal government that is providing the support and the guidance, and things like a strong CMHC to ensure that that the city and the province are enabled to be able to do it. Because right now they're trying to do it on their own, and they're having a struggle. It's obvious. Like we all know it. We all feel it, right? Yeah. Every time somebody gets rent-evicted, they feel it.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back to wrap up here with Breen Ouellette, who's the NDP candidate for Vancouver Centre. I'll be right back with Breen. Great. Here we are back with Breen Ouellette. This has been a great conversation. Before we wrap this up, a couple of things I want to dial us right back to Vancouver Centre. So Hedy Fry is your competitor. She obviously has a big fan following. I personally often wonder why. I don't get it. I think she's had her stay, and I hope that you're successful. Why do you think it is that people continue to vote for Hedy Fry, election after election, and she's got this kind of large following?
Yeah. Well, I've looked at it, and what I see is that near the end of the election cycle, Hedy starts talking about the conservative boogeyman. That's what she pulls out of the closet. She puts on this show of, if you vote for the other guy, the NDP, you're gonna put this in power. And it's
so the idea is like, when you say conservative boogeyman, you vote NDP, you're not voting conservative, but you're splitting the left vote. Is that the idea? And then the conservative candidate comes through and wins.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. And I, talking to people that I know,
what a terrible way to. I hope people don't. My message is, don't vote that way, folks. Like, figure out who you like, vote for them. That's what democracy is supposed to be about.
Yeah, and don't vote out of fear. Yeah. I mean, we know what we get with the Liberals, and we also know what we get with the Conservatives, because we've had them both, and we've had them both recently. And if you're voting out of fear instead of what you believe is right, you're just going to feel like you need to take a shower after you're done. Why do you want to feel that way for 4 years? Sure. Vote for the party that matches your ideals, and make sure you understand what those ideals are. And the NDP is a big tent. We've got a lot of room for a lot of people. We want to help people. The only group that I really think the NDP is going after are the so-called super rich, people that are earning millions upon millions of dollars annually, and also hiding that money offshore.
Right.
Those people are using our public infrastructure to benefit themselves, and they're not giving back the fair share. That's a very small group of people, but it's a very large amount of wealth. It's 15 to 16 billion dollars. It's 5% of Canada's annual budget is being lost to super rich tax cheats. Mm-hmm. We're not talking about lawyers or dentists or financial planners. We're talking about people that live in the very rarefied air, that have the resources
kind of
to
Justin
do that.
Justin Trudeau's and Bill Marno's friends.
Yes, they are. Yeah, and it's interesting.
It's so fascinating. Yeah, and sad. The Liberal Party of Canada has had just multiple years of massive deficits. They've spent a ton of money. And as a Canadian who's born and raised in this country, from my lens, there's not a lot to show for it. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on that?
Well,
I know it's a planted question. I'm giving my own view, but
it's funny because a lot of people see the NDP as being the big spenders, and we're even looking into things like the way that certain demographics, like the Chinese, are targeted by the Chinese media, and we're always portrayed as spending a lot of money. But to the best of my recollection, every NDP government that I've dealt with provincially comes in as the cleanup crew for the Conservatives or the Liberals, right, and fixes things. Grant Devine in Saskatchewan, prime example. Man, did he make a mess of the province. And the NDP came in over 15 years, got everything back on track. And then once people got comfortable, they put the Conservatives under the guise of the Sask party back into power. And you know what? When I talk to people in Saskatchewan right now, they're feeling a lot of similarities with the Devine years, and I think they're gonna probably go back to the NDP and ask them to clean it up all over again. And here in BC, we've got the BC NDP. Everybody said they were gonna just spend a ton of money, and there was an article recently, I can't remember who printed it, but the budget is fantastic. The spending is superb. So you can actually have the social services you need and spend less money by being smart about the way you spend it and by spending it in a way that prevents more expensive things happening down the road. And I think that's really what the NDP is about, and that's why people should be voting for us. We're doing the smart thing to help as many people as possible.
Well, Breen, that's a phenomenal finish to this and a great answer. And actually, yeah, if I was living in Vancouver Centre, you'd have my vote, because I'm a big believer that the government already has more than enough money.
Yeah.
They just have to be smarter with the way they're spending it. That's my view.
I agree.
Before you go, let's give a plug to your social media. So if people want to get engaged, they want to get behind you. So you've got a website, I'm assuming?
Yes,
Yeah.
and it's electbreen.ca.
Breen is spelled
Breen.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you'll put graphics up or not in the podcast. Yeah, okay.
But those are people, there'll be a lot of people who are just listening to this, so they won't be seeing the YouTube portion of it.
Yeah.
Have
then,
you got social media?
Yeah,
Okay.
you can find me on Twitter at Breen Ouellette, and you can find me on Facebook. Just search Breen Ouellette, and I'll spell the last name because that's a real mouthful of vowels. It's Ouellette. TTE, and
Right.
it make sure you get all the E's.
And do you guys know yet when if people wanted to listen to you in person or here in a debate, have those dates been set or anything like that?
There are a number of debates that are coming up. I would say go to the website, and we're going to be posting them as they become finalized.
Yeah.
I guess the thing about the community debates is there's always a chance that we might be the only people showing up, and then it'll be a question of whether or not that one goes ahead.
I see.
Especially with a candidate like Hedy Fry. There's a question of whether or not she has the energy to go and do all the debates. So we'll find out.
Well, she follows after her leader. I don't think she's going to show up to me. I don't know if you noticed that today. Justin Trudeau, I guess he's too good for everybody. They only show up to two debates. So
yeah.
Look, man, best of luck with this. Thanks for coming in, and we'll see the results on October 21st or shortly thereafter.
Sounds great.
Thanks for coming in today, Breen. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.